Please take your seats. Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Quel plaisir de vous accueillir dans le cadre de notre deuxième édition de la Semaine du 9. Je suis Jeffrey Stonehouse, directeur artistique du Vivier et aussi membre du comité exécutif Impact. C'est avec plaisir que j'anime cette conférence aujourd'hui, disponible en live sur YouTube et qui fera l'objet d'un podcast si jamais vous souhaitez le réécouter. Bienvenue donc dans cette conférence internationale hybride organisée par le réseau Impact Musiques Nouvelles, anciennement Cartel. Pour commencer très rapidement, le réseau Impact, c'est quoi? Il regroupe plusieurs diffuseurs de musique nouvelle du monde pour échanger sur les grands enjeux auxquels ils sont confrontés. Nous sommes heureux de recevoir ici à Montréal, dans le cadre de la semaine, les membres du comité. Welcome to today's international conference in hybrid format, organized by Impact New Music Network, formerly known as Cartel, piloted by Le Vivier. The Impact New Music Network is formed of new music presenters from around the globe and aims to provide a space for reflection and exchange on global issues that confront presenters. Le Vivier is happy to host today's event in Montreal's Biosphere. We're fortunate today to be in the bright and beautiful space with a panoramic view of the city. Today's members of Impact Committee, alongside composers and artists, will be discussing our shared issues as global new music community. Today's conference is titled New Music, International Perspectives on Sustainability and Community Engagement, and will be available as a live stream on YouTube and will subsequently be available as a podcast. Ce sont les membres du comité Impact aux côtes d'artistes qui interviendront durant cette conférence, qui a pour thématique Musiques Nouvelles, perspectives internationales sur l'éco-responsabilité et l'engagement communautaire. Elle se déroulera en deux temps. Une première partie traitant de l'accessibilité et de l'inclusion en musique nouvelle interviendront David Pay de Musique en Main, membre du comité Impact, mais aussi l'artiste montréalaise Louise Campbell et Min Tam Nguyen, des percussions de Strasbourg. Dans un deuxième temps, nous donnerons la parole à notre comité exécutif sur l'environnement et l'éco-responsabilité comme inspiration en musique de création. Héloïse Amaral d'Ultima Oslo Contemporary Music Festival, Kate Nordstrom de The Great Northern et Liquid Music, les deux membres du comité Impact, qui prendront la parole aux côtés de Scott Thompson et Moon Young Ha. Merci aux équipes de la Biosphère de bien vouloir nous accueillir chez eux, au ministère de la Culture et des Communications du Québec et au Conseil des Arts et Lettres du Québec, ainsi que les délégations du Québec à l'étranger qui ont permis d'organiser cette rencontre et surtout, merci à vous tous et toutes d'être ici avec nous. Les temps changent, nos contextes de diffusion aussi, et nous devons imaginer ensemble des nouvelles avenues pour maintenir la création musicale au cœur de nos communautés, notre quotidien et aussi nos pratiques. Let's begin with today's first theme, accessibility and inclusion in new music. Strategies, examples, and reflection on forging new relationships. Today we're tackling questions about how to connect with communities that are underrepresented in our programming and also in our audiences. Our speakers today, David Pay from Musique en Main, Impact Executive Committee member, Montreal artist Louise Campbell, and Min Tam Nguyen, Artistic Director of Les Percussions de Strasbourg. Louise Campbell is a versatile Montreal-based musician, active as a conductor, cultural mediator, community arts facilitator, and musician's health therapist. As a composer, performer, and improviser, Louise seeks to interrogate and renew the ways in which we make music by creating new works with everyone, regardless of age, ability, level of experience, or training. Her specializations include improvisation and creation with untrained or amateur musicians, improvised conducting, cross-disciplinary creation, commissioned works, and public engagement. She has toured as a performer, guest artist, and lecturer of improvised and composed music across Canada, the US, France, Germany, and Brazil. David Pay is Musique en Main's founder and artistic director, earning a reputation as one of today's leading-edge concert programmers. As an independent arts consultant specializing in strategic planning, marketing, fundraising, and producing, David has worked with leading arts organizations, musicians, and video artists. He served on faculty at Capilano University Arts and Entertainment Management Department and as Associate Director, Fall and Winter Music Programs at the BAMP Center. His essays and interviews about music have appeared at carnegiehall.org and in Vancouver Review. Other roles include artistic producer of the opening night gala of Classical Next in Rotterdam to 2015 and Artistic Director of the ISCM World New Music Days in 2017 in Vancouver. He's also part of Impact New Music Network's Executive Committee. Min Tam Nguyen. Tam studied percussion at the Conservatoire Régional de Nice in the class of Jacques Carré, where he was a graduate in June 1999. He continued his studies at the Supérieur National Conservatoire of Music and Dance in Lyon, l'École Supérieure Nationale de Lyon, with Jean Geoffroy, and obtained his diploma in June 2003. Assistant professor at the Conservatoire Régional de Nice in 2003, then as professor at the Conservatoire in 2006. He was also at the Conservatoire Régional de Toulon, Provence, en Méditerranée. Tam is soloist and artistic director of Les Percussions de Strasbourg and teaches at the École Supérieure de Musique et Danse de Lyon. He was named Chevalier des Arts et Lettres from the French Minister of Culture. To begin with, Tam, let's start with you. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of Les Percussions' strategies for reaching new communities? When I had the pleasure of visiting your wonderful facility this autumn, I noticed that you're in a specific kind of setting. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So, hello. Sorry for my Franglish, but today I'm talking about this specific place that we have in Percussion de Strasbourg. Percussion de Strasbourg is a 62 years old ensemble, and we are in a place in a poor neighborhood of Strasbourg since the 80s, so in 1979. And when I arrived at the group, it was 10 years ago, one journalist told me that you always are abroad, never in Strasbourg and never in our neighborhood. And I was like frustrated to say that yes, you're right. And we decided to work more with the people from this neighborhood. The group used to have a pedagogy which name is Percustra, and it exists like 40 years ago. And they did it with a lot of people, with a lot of people from Strasbourg and mostly from the center of Strasbourg, but never that much from our neighborhood, which is like it's like I said, it has like more than 25 nationalities. So we decided to work with them for many reasons. First is that's where we live, so it's normal that we work with those people, and if we are feeling better when getting home, it is much better when we are living it. So it was one of the main things that we thought about. Second is our audience. We have this place. It's a big chance to have this place to rehearse, to have all the instrument there, all our office is there, and we also have the chance to have a theater which is how can I say, just stuck to our building, and we can just open the door and we have a very nice theater. It's not ours, it's from the city, but we use it. And with these tools, we develop a lot of things with the audience. And I talk about this audience because usually, let's say when I arrived, we made the first concert in this hall, the theater, and all the heads were like with white hair. So we decided to find something to change this. Of course, the French government and everywhere in the world asked us to do this. And my answer would be that I want to work with the children. Of course, it's not a new answer, but we have children in this neighborhood that we can touch constantly. It's not only one time. In a lot of places, when you say that you work with one school, you say, okay, now let's go to another school. And we decided to work many times with the schools and with all the students. So all of them, since the primary school until the high school, know us now. They know us because we are going to grab them. We're grabbing them since they are 8 until the 18. So we did a lot of workshops. We made them presenting our shows. We had experiences with the directors of the schools. They say, okay, you are doing complicated stuff, no one can understand. So I say, okay, so let's make your students talk about our programs. So we can do this because we are living there and we want to work with those schools. And it's a chance. It's a chance, but we took it just only a few years ago. So now we're working a lot on this. We have seen that our audience has changed. Specifically, we do workshops. We have 6 workshops per year. Each workshop is 14 times. So it means that we have 6 different workshops and we have a concert at the end of the year with all of these students. So it goes from 8 years old. We have 2 classes of primary school and we also have 2 classes of 12, 13 years old. And we have open public workshop, which is for the neighborhood, the workers in the neighborhood, and the people who live there. And this year we also have a workshop with disabled people. So we have this program, and every year we have a theme. And this year we're working with disabled people. So we wrote a piece for a group which name is Percussion de Très Fort, which are all disabled, and we play with them. And the theme this year is to work also with a workshop dedicated to disabled people, and to do the concerts with the college and all the schools at the end of the year. So every year we have this. We had last year Xenakis, work around Xenakis, work around Thierry Demey the year before. And it's a way for us also to get this audience involved in our programs on tour in the year. So this year we did this, and we also do a whole year working around disabled people, and for example, we work also with Musica, with deaf people, having a program they did before and they want to work on with us. We're creating a specific program for deaf people. So this year is like a test for this, but we want to continue with this to develop our public and to make it younger and different.
But it sounds like the strategy in your case is very much based on a regular intervention and contact with these diverse audiences, new audiences, but then also sort of this participatory aspect where they're actually part of your programming, right?
Yes. It's a big part for us now, and even when we create a new program, we always think the pedagogic program with it. So when we create Gosland or Timelessness, every time we're thinking about the program, we always think about how to make the transmission about this program, which kind of workshop we can do on it, because it works. Our home is the experimentation place, but we can use it when we go on tour. So it means that when we play every program everywhere, we can do workshops because we already prepare everything specifically to the people where we go.
Wonderful. Louise, how does that compare or perhaps contrast to your process?
There are some similarities for sure, because I work a lot as a cultural mediator with people of all ages, and so I have relationships that I've developed over years that then we go through musical processes, and over the years I started to realize that we had pieces that were almost done that I felt needed to be heard by more people than just me and people who were in the room with me. And because of that, I now have a project called GIFT that will be presented by the Vivier and Innovations in Concert in the fall of 2024. That is a collection of these pieces that we built together through a cultural mediation process. So that's certainly the similar thing. I think the part that is not the same is that I go to people. So I implicate myself in other people's organizations, in other people's communities. And I'm very lucky because I have the great luck and privilege of them welcoming me in. So I very much become a part of some of the communities that I've been involved with over the years.
I believe we have even some photos, perhaps, of this process. Colm, could you maybe flash those for us on the screen?
Yeah, for sure, because I don't work with pre-existing music usually. Sometimes I do, but generally we share a creative process together in which we make the music together. So this is an example of the Care Center, which is a center for adults with severe physical disabilities. And this was the first project we did about 8 years ago. And as you can see, we were making instruments. So when I go in to work with people, I want them to make their own music. Every person involved in the Care Center has a unique body, they have unique abilities, and so it made no sense for me to go in and say, here's my clarinet, you play this. That's absolutely nonsensical. So we made, for one woman, wearable instruments. She didn't have a lot of grip capacity with her hands, and she loved fashion. So wearable instruments where she'd have bells on her fingers, rings on her toes, then she had music everywhere she went. There were other people who did have a lot of grip capacity and were very, very strong and needed to get their energy out. And so they were able to build larger instruments that took a lot more effort to play. The woman in the top, sitting right next to me, top second from the left, her name's Yota, and she communicates with her eyes. She's nonverbal, and this communication system allows her to have very sophisticated communication with people who understand the way that she communicates. I wanted her to have the primary experience of being able to shape music. And so in that picture, you can see that she's conducting everybody with the instruments that we've all built together. She is an artistic soul, 100%, very emotional, and had a lot to say. And so from 8 years ago, we started to talk together and exchange about music, and we have built a piece together that will be featured in the show in the fall.
Can you talk to us a little bit about the context for presentation of the work? Like, who are you hoping will be there? Exactly. Yeah. So no, but you point, but this is a podcast too, right?
Yes. So the audience for this, actually taking the leap to turn this work that I do into a show is actually a big deal, because first of all, you have to make sure that people want their work to be presented. And in general, that's a pretty enthusiastic yes. If it's a no though, I respect it. Like there's absolutely no obligation on their part that this becomes a show. Me as the professional artist, it's my job to make sure that everything happens as it should, so that there doesn't be an extra heavy weight on them, because it should be a pleasure. It should be something that they want to share. So the particular context of the Care Center is that many of the people there use mobility devices. And so when I was looking for a venue to host this, I was coming up against Montreal, which is a fairly old city and has a lot of work to do on accessibility. So if you call up a venue and ask if they're accessible, many of them will say yes, absolutely. And there's room in the back of the hall for one wheelchair. I needed room for 25 wheelchairs or other mobility devices that operate differently with people's caregivers. And I wanted them to be front and center, not in the back somewhere. And so perhaps some of the people here who are from Montreal know some of the venues better, could point me in some other directions, but I came up with a grand total of 2 venues that would be appropriate for this show. Because my priority was making sure that the 25 people who were part of this process could come. And so thank you very much for being enthusiastic about this, because Olivier is the reason why we do have access to one of those 2 venues that will be able to welcome people.
And some of you have been in this space, so it's the Espace Orange at l'Édifice Wilder, and the advantage here is that it's a highly modular space that, you know, we can really open it up and do whatever we'd like actually with it, so that it fit for this specific project. Thanks, Louise. Dave, in the context of Musiques Nouvelles, you're doing tons of innovative work. Talk to us about some of the new strategies that you're developing right now.
When we were speaking before today, we were talking about Musiques Nouvelles' desire to work with Indigenous folk, and specifically in Vancouver, We're on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations. And in Canada, we speak about reconciliation, we speak about right relations all the time. And we also, in the new music world in Canada, we embrace a kind of pan-indigeneity. And in the political world of reconciliation, we also speak about land back. Land acknowledgements are something that are just very normal in Vancouver, and they're always changing how we approach them. And it comes from a tradition of, for tens of thousands of years, when you arrive at someone's land, you introduce yourself, and you introduce your ancestors, and you introduce how you came here, and you say thank you to the people whose land you're on for welcoming you. And this relationship to land is something that's existed for tens of thousands of years where I'm from, but it's not something that we think about really in our music making, in European contemporary music making, or most music makings from around the world. We don't think about this relationship to the people of those lands. So a few years back, we identified that we wanted to find out if Music on Main could be, or could provide, or could have a relationship around creating a platform specifically for Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. And so this is the project that we've embarked on. And Julia Olevla is the Artistic Associate at Music on Main who leads this project. And one of the things that she was saying is how many organizations want to foster these kinds of partnerships, and that we come with certain expectations about how those partnerships might unfold, but it rarely takes that course. We come with a specific cultural expectation of, I'm going to offer a commission, I'm going to offer a platform or a stage, I'm going to offer workshops, I'm going to, like all of these things that are so embedded in how we make our work. And when we've through a project that's initiated by another music organization in Vancouver, there's Vancouver Musicians for Reconciliation is a new coalition that is paying rent to the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. So each of the organizations or musicians involved in that pay rent. And at first, I wasn't really on side with this. I was like, it just feels transactional. Like, write a check. This doesn't feel like reconciliation. But it was actually through this this idea that a relationship's established with the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. And recently we met a Tsleil-Waututh musician named Felix Stick, who's really interested in finding opportunities in different spaces and opportunities with different kinds of musicians, but with a real strong focus on community development for Tsleil-Waututh citizens. And so Julia and Felix have just started talking together about what that might turn out to be. You were talking, Tom, about making work where you live, and how it takes years of relationship building with individuals. And we talk about right relations, and we talk about being in relationship a lot when we talk about work around reconciliation, but it's actually at the core of all good work, I think, is being in relationship with people around you. So we're at the very beginning of trying to find out what Music on Main can do, what are relationships, like what are valuable relationships for Tsleil-Waututh people, for Musqueam people, for Squamish people with Music on Main. And it might be nothing. It might be, can you help me write a grant? It might be, hey, can you put me on stage? But learning these different forms that it can take is kind of transforming the organization as well.
And I'm curious, so at this stage it's fairly early in the development, right? So what are you experiencing in terms of perhaps challenges, or you've mentioned amazing positive outcomes. What's the process like?
Well, in Vancouver, everybody is required to reach out to the nations whose land it is to do any work. So if you're building a large new real estate development, you need to reach out to the nations. If you're building a pipeline, you need to reach out to the nations. If you're the Port of Vancouver, you need to do that. And all arts organizations are really interested in having real relationships as well. So the Tsleil-Waututh Nation is 600 citizens. And so they have a band office, and everybody's knocking on their door. Everybody's wanting access to them. Squamish is a few thousand, Musqueam is in between that. And so the timelines for this, you know, if I want to work with the city of Vancouver, I can call up an officer and I'll get a response this week for sure. But the volume of requests that are given to First Nations organizations around the country, I think all Indigenous organizations, is overwhelming. So first off, the timeline is really different. And then the culture is completely different. And there's sort of a timeline around that, and it's about relationships. And so, Louise knows somebody who introduces Tom to Jeff, who then meets so-and-so, and like it's just a different, longer process. And the other thing that many people have told us and taught us, and that we do see, is that you cannot underestimate the trauma and the intergenerational trauma of residential schools, of the 60s sweep, of our government working very hard to eliminate language and to eliminate belief, and the devastation of culture, and the amazing renaissance of culture that is coming, and the amount of work and the amount of care and kindness and understanding that needs to go into being in relationship with folks who have that background.
This sounds like it's a lot about patience and time and leaving space. Louise, that must resemble some of your experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, whenever I go into any group of people, the care center or otherwise, I know that they have a long history together, and I'm going to respect that. If I put myself in the position of somebody calling me up, a cold call saying, hey, can we do something? I want to put you in a grant, and by the way, I need a letter of support tomorrow. No, thanks. So if I spin it around, then I need to respect the relationships and the lives that other people have as well too. It's as simple as that. It's a very, very simple question of respect.
And Tam, for work within the school system in your neighborhood, was it a similar feeling, or was it just a magical? You made 2 phone calls and it worked.
No. Yes. No, of course not. We tried all our pedagogy system is still in try. So we're trying things. So of course at the beginning it doesn't work. The people who came for our pedagogy stuff wasn't those schools. So we had to change the whole mentality of our pedagogy also. And we went to the school because we wanted to. My history is I lived in this kind of neighborhood, and there is no reason that a guy like me could be in this network today and doing stuff with art and things like this. People who come from this neighborhood just get back to this neighborhood. So I wanted to do this myself. So my musicians, my team, they don't want to go to the neighborhood, into the neighborhoods, this neighborhood, because it's dangerous. But I think those people from the neighborhood are more scared to come in our place. So that's what I realized, and that's what I want to do, because I know this, and I go to bring them into our place, which is much more difficult than us to go in their place.
Yeah, going towards
these
communities or meeting them where they are. Dave, we often think of there's like a fourth wall, or there's a division, right, between what we present on our stages and the audience experience. What's Musiques Nouvelles doing to break that down a little bit? So many things.
Well, so many things and so many traps that we continue to get caught by, I'm sure. When we look at new relationships with Indigenous folk, like where we choose to put on music, that makes a huge difference. Exactly the same experience of, are you welcome here? Are there enough places for how you get to the space? Like when Louise was speaking about mobility devices, does it feel like a safe place for a community to come to? So we've always, for the whole time of Musiques Nouvelles, tried to create informal environments where more people feel welcome. But of course, people like me feel most welcome. And so how do we continue to expand that by changing the composition of the team, the people on stage, the people managing the tickets, like just trying to do some small changes like that. But it remains really tricky, and then it also remains really tricky to completely pull yourself out of well, I put concerts on a stage, and oh, well, I can make this room into a stage, and I can make that park into a stage, but I'm still thinking about a stage. And so how can I learn from people we're partnering with, or people that we meet around, well, what do you need to have music in your life? As opposed to necessarily needing a platform to present music to other people.
Well, I think at this stage we can open up for questions, or perhaps also other examples of how some of you in the audience are connecting with audiences that aren't represented on our stages or in our programming. Charlotte has got a microphone here. Any questions?
Well, and you know, one of the other things that maybe prompts questions too is a question that I continue to have, and we've been thinking a lot about lately, is sort of repertoire versus process. You know, like creating pieces that get put on in performance versus doing work that is about music making that possibly other people also listen to. You know, and I think for me, there's something starting to change a little bit around wanting to do both and wanting to make space for the process of music making, possibly with non-professional musicians like Louise does, possibly for audiences to experience something new with professional musicians. I'm not sure. So I don't know if other people have this experience of like moving away from repertoire.
Yes. Perhaps just state your name and organization before your question. Thanks.
Yeah, my name is Barbara Scales, and I'm based here in Montreal. I just wanted to, a few years ago, maybe 15, maybe more, sort of lost track of time, the Nouvel Ensemble Moderne did a project with a school teacher on the South Shore, so over there, who was, I think it was an elementary school, so 10-year-olds kind of thing, I believe. And they worked in conjunction with some graduate students in composition, and the graduate students went into the classroom once a month and worked with the kids to get them to create sounds. So it was a composition project. The kids created sounds, and then they created notation systems that they invented to represent those sounds. And then the Nouvel Ensemble Moderne did a concert of those pieces for those students. And it was I think, kind of a once in a lifetime, because it required the school agreeing, it required the school district agreeing, it required a very strong initiative from a school teacher and kids who engaged, plus the graduate students, and it was a wonderful project. I was one of about 40 people who went to the concert in a hall that seated about 400, but still, it was great. And we got to see some of the notation systems that were developed by these students. I just want to say one thing though. I always, when I work with artists and they're on tour, I say they really love to do workshops. Is there something they can do? They can go to senior centers, they can go to elementary schools, and far too often, especially with Universe, the response I get is, oh, we don't have the staff to organize that, we don't have the money to organize that. And I think that with all the great ideas people have, and Louise, I have no idea how you finance all that you do. It's amazing, but it's so important to lobby for, as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says, culture belongs to everybody and everybody must have access. And so how do we make that happen? And governments and donors and so on have to contribute financially to be able to make that possible. Thanks.
Thank you, Barbara. Got another question?
Lawrence Turney, Soundstreams based in Toronto. I guess it's an observation perhaps, or an anecdote. For us, it all comes down to storytelling, in the sense that I was very fortunate. Something like 30 years ago, we began to collaborate with the Indigenous artists and Indigenous themes. And many years later, among others, Michael Briar's and I and his company, Signal Theatre, have created 4 major projects together. But the way, again, important, difficult questions. Who has the right to tell whose stories? And the way we've always gone about it is to partner, in this case, with organizations like Signal Theatre, and together we create work. Is it challenging? Of course, just as one example. Within the Indigenous community, there are ways of communicating when you're looking to cast, for example, that are very different from the way, for example, that, you know, certainly that I think about casting. We learned a great deal about patience, and of course, other ways we can, and time, so important. Anyhow, so we created over many years, most recently, a number of projects, one called Two Odysseys. Two Odysseys is Primurtuum, the Cree word for the journey, 2 one-act operas. The other is called Galabartnet in the Sami language. Both set stories from the Cree culture and the Sami culture. We have a partner in Bevash Sami Theatre based in the north of Norway, Kautokeino, Norway, Signal Theatre. And this project, truly intercultural in that it is Indigenous-led. The majority of the artists are of Indigenous heritage, the majority of the creative team. I and Soundstreams, we are not an Indigenous organization, but again, it's only one example of the way we think about creating intercultural work, which is to partner with organizations and coming together to collaborate, to create new work together. We have been there are those who say that as Soundstreams, we don't have the right to do this. Of course, there will always, the moment you do anything, somebody will tell you, you shouldn't do it. But it has been very, it's been a very rich and rewarding experience for us over many years to work in this way. And it's one example of the Indigenous community, which is so important in our current society in Canada to come to. Since the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report nearly 10 years ago, no one can say we didn't know. Anyway.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Can I respond to that?
Of course.
Just jumping off of some of the ideas that you were bringing out, I think it's also important to ask yourself why you want to do this work, why you want to present this work. And also, see if you can try to understand why the people you want to work with might want to as well. You know, so if I keep on going with the example of the care center, I started to feel like we had pieces, we'd follow processes. This is everything that I do. We'd follow processes that I felt were pieces in themselves. And that these pieces and these voices of these people, they had the right to be heard by more than just me. And the reason why it's happening is because the people at the care center care a lot about their voices being heard. You've got to remember that many people are nonverbal. So having an artwork that helps to tell their story to people who aren't within the care center is a big deal. And I learned that very specifically with the podcast that we produced over the pandemic. Just how important it was for them to have their voice heard outside of the walls of the care center. So that to me is like where the why, my why and their why come together.
Almost art as a way of amplifying a specific perspective that maybe isn't heard as often.
Yeah, and give other people the opportunity to hear it too. You know, so as you were asking before, you know, I'm gonna do my best to make sure that everybody in the care center can come, but I hope that everybody in this room could also come as well too, so that there's a normalization of a multiplicity of experiences in the world. And one of the things that I think that art can do is it can help us to start to understand somebody else's experience.
I'd be curious, because I know we have perspectives from around the globe in the room right now. The context in Europe at the moment, I wonder, the conflicts in Ukraine, the displacement of refugees through several different conflicts. Is there anyone who's working specifically to connect with populations that are new arrivals in your regions or your communities And if so, what does that look like? No one. Interesting. Ici, oui. So here we've got the Centre des Musiciens du Monde, who's connecting with immigrant or refugee musicians who arrive in Montreal to give them spaces to perform. Yes? Oh, let's make sure you have the microphone.
We have in Toronto, but their work is national, I guess international, the Institute for Canadian Citizenship, which was started by the former Governor General Adrian Clarkson. And what they do is there are, of course, huge numbers of immigrants arriving in Toronto, and they give access to arts activities. Again, it's not the same as, it doesn't take the place of feeding and housing and all of those important, most important things, but again, it is a sincere and successful attempt to connect, help these communities, and vice versa for us to connect with them as well. It's not a one-way street at all.
Great, thank you. Any last comments? If not, I think we can wrap. There'll be a very, very short break, but I think what we can retain from this is that we connecting and engaging with new audiences and communities takes time, it takes patience, and the potential that we have through our art form to actually amplify perspectives that aren't normally heard. But an ongoing process is something that I also hear that we're all tackling from various different ways. Yes?
Actually, there's a disturbing, Louise raised the question, what's in it for the person who has a story to tell? And I've come across over the many decades and on two different continents, experiences where people didn't want to share their music, didn't want to share their story. In both cases, it was indigenous cultures, one in Australia and one in Canada, where the individuals involved, and it was sometimes more than an individual, it was a community, said, you know, every time you settlers, you white people, touch anything to do with us, you destroy it. I don't want you to know my music. I don't want you to hear it. I don't want you to make it, to play it. And that is, you know, it's a conversation stopper in a way, but it's an important dynamic to understand and to respect. And I'm not quite sure where to go with it, but I think it's important to recognize that it's a dynamic.
Yeah, questions of decolonizing our way of decolonizing our way of creating art, but also programming to open it up.
And you know, Sandeep said how capitalism treats music as a commodity, something to handle, to have, to, you know, maybe to share, but still, in some sense, as a commodity. And I think, you know, we have to hear people say, no, you're not going to do that to my music.
And make space for people to be able to say no, yes, different, same. Like, I think that's, yeah, the need to make safe spaces for people to really be able to articulate that. And sometimes we don't even know the question that we're supposed to ask around cultural protocol or individual desire.
Hi, I'm Sandeep Bhagwati. I'm a composer, and I've been leading many projects with trans traditional musicians all across the world. When I look at this title of the conference, there's something that of the resonance that Barbara just mentioned, because both accessibility and inclusion presuppose a privileged place to which you give others access. You invite others to sit on your sofa. But that's not a real dialogue. That's not a real meeting on the same level. You have a sofa, they don't, and so you invite them to sit on it. I don't know if you use such words, we already, you know, create the kind of difference that the actions are, or the words say we don't want, but the actions still say that.
And what would you propose suppose. I'm curious. No, it's a real question. I think it's because I hear what you're saying. It delineates two spaces. So how do you get rid of that divide?
It's a bit like probably in nature discourse too. When you talk about culture and nature, you create two spaces, and one of the solutions is to understand that this division does not exist. There's no nature, just as there's no culture. There's just one space in which we inhabit, and it's the same here. It's one communal situation in which we need to work out the differences and the commonalities. And I would always stress the commonalities. In the projects that I do, it's usually the commonalities that carry the day, not harping too much on including and opening up for you and so on. All these actions and gestures are disruptive in such context in my experience.
Focusing on what we have that's similar. Yep. Thank you, Sandy. Are there any further comments?
We speak a lot about unlearning, and if you have an open door policy, it implies that there's a building that has a door, and it's like, well, of course there's a building with a door. It's one of my challenges is just learning these completely other cultural and philosophical contexts.
Thank you. Wonderful. We'll take a short break before changing to the next panel. So there's coffee and all sorts of delicious breakfast behind you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Sweet.
Yeah. Very cool production-based organization, and also response to environmental things that are culture and religion.
you know, because of a lease different. I know, exactly. I mean, and I think it's just an opportunity. I mean, no problem to the group that are working in it. Yeah, I'm going to use the restroom quick.
Welcome back. Today's second discussion is titled Sustainability and Environment as Creative Inspiration in New Music. We're thrilled to be joined by IMPACT's executive committee members, Eloisa Amaral from Ultima Oslo Contemporary Music Festival in Norway, and Kate Nordstrom from the Great Northern and also Liquid Music in the US. Alongside artists Scott Thompson and Moon-Young Ha. Eloisa Amaral, Brazilian-born Eloisa Amaral is a pianist, researcher, and curator. Musical partnerships include duo Helkvist Amaral and Ensemble Neon. Recently graduated with a PhD in artistic research from the Orpheus Institute and University, Eloisa lectures in curatorial practices in music at the Royal Conservatory of The Hague and has been recently, not so recently actually, appointed as artistic director of Ultima. She is also part of Impact New Music Network's executive committee. Kate Nordstrom is artistic director, producer, and owner of Liquid Music New York. Originally founded as a special project series at the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra in 2012, Nordstrom is also executive and artistic director of the Great Northern, a Minneapolis-based midwinter festival, and co-founder director of curatorial collective Infinity Palette. She's also part of the Impact New Music Executive Committee. Scott Thompson is a trombonist composer whose commitment to open improvisation is the basis of much of his current work. As a producer, Scott has co-led the Association of Improvising Musicians in Toronto and the Montreal-Toronto Art Orchestra. He's created site-specific compositions for mobile musicians and audiences in unconventional contexts, including the National Gallery of Canada and the Art Gallery of Ontario. Scott was artistic director and general director of the Guelph Jazz Festival from 2017 to 23, and is currently artistic and general director of the Festival International de Musique Actuelle in Victoriaville. Moon-Young Ha is a composer from South Korea currently living and working in New York City. His music has focused on combining traditional instruments with electronics and video to effect relevant and meaningful experiences for diverse audiences. He is artistic director of Mizan, a New York-based contemporary music collective and festival. Welcome, everyone. Scott, I'd like to start with you, and perhaps you could talk to us a little bit about your Arboreation project that was presented last season.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, I'm going to be talking about one of my pieces called Arborienteering, or in French, Arborientation, which is a piece that I've mounted in 3 versions in 3 different cities, and the one in Montreal last June was the most recent and the most elaborate. And Arborientation exists in a species of my composing that is site-specific, and they all have in common that the musicians are spread out in space, often playing simultaneously or in overlapping manners, provoking the audience to have to choose how to move through the space in order to experience the music as they please. Arborientation, I call these pieces map pieces or cartographic composition because the score is effectively, along with some other material, a map and a time index that shows where musicians are going to play and when they're going to play. And so I compose these contexts, but I leave the content of what they play up to the skilled improvising musicians for whom I compose. It's undeniably corny, but in a world with so much content creation, I consider myself a context creator in this case. An important aspect of all these pieces are the scores, which double as event programs. It's a score for the musician, but really more so, it's a score for the audience. So this is the score event program for Arborientation, and I've put piles around the room on that table there, in the back, in the front here. I got lots, help yourself. It's a really nice little booklet. And so with the map and with a time index, it invites an audience to move through the spaces they please. The concept of Arborientation is really simple. In fact, it's probably the simplest of these pieces. At 1 p.m., the viola player starts playing next to a larch. At 1:05, the viola player keeps playing next to his larch, but about 50 meters away, the tuba player starts playing next to her pine. At 1:10, The viola player stops playing next to his larch, the tuba player continues playing, and then the bass clarinetist plays next to their maple, and so on. It's just it's a relay. And the audience has to decide, do they stick with the previous musician? Do they move ahead to the next musician? Or do they position themselves halfway in between? Personally, that's my favorite, to find a place where I can hear all the music as it's unfolding. There's 16 musicians involved in Aborientation last June, each paired with a specific tree, and each playing 2 10-minute solos over the course of a piece that lasted about 2 hours and 45 minutes, and the audience was invited to wander through the space and enjoy the music as they please.
Just for context, this was in the Montreal Botanical Gardens.
I'm sorry, did I not say that?
No,
Yeah,
that's okay.
Yeah, so the Montreal Botanical Garden has quite a special arboretum, and obviously a nice variety of tree species. So I was invited by Production Super Musique and the Vivier to compose specifically. Well, it was my proposal, but they got on board. And it was great. So there's like a 1-minute video, which is an excerpt of a longer video by Robin Pineda Gould that features some of the performances, just little bits of the performances. And what you don't get from this experience is the bleed of the music in the different spaces. It's pretty much focused on individual musicians, but what it does give you is a sense of the wind that day. It was just amazing, and it added a special character to this version of the piece. The video is by Robin Pineda Gould, and it's on YouTube, easily searchable. It's a nice thing. Those musicians were Jean René, Laurie Friedman, Alison Burek, Pablo Jimenez, and Sam Shalabi.
Great, thank you, Scott. The context here is the fact that the audience was able to explore the space, I think, and move and create the sonic experience that they desired in that moment is one of the really interesting aspects of your work. And what other kind of spaces have you, because you did it in Guelph, I believe, as well, right?
Yeah, I did a version of this piece in the Arboretum at the University of Guelph. That was a pandemic project under the auspices of the Guelph Jazz Festival. I also did it in Dufferin Grove Park in Toronto many years ago. But I've also done versions of these kinds of pieces in major art galleries, like was mentioned in my bio. In that case, I had a brass octet where the musicians were moving according to a very specific route and pace, so that they would converge in front of particular artworks, play together in front of the artwork for a few minutes, and then diverge on there. So it was a network of convergences and divergences. That was pretty neat. The thing that I like about these pieces is it gives audience an agency that mirrors the creative decision making of the musicians, and either they can use the specific information in the score to compose how they move through the space, which is effectively composing their experience of the sound, or they can grab this, put it in their bag, and ignore this information and just follow their ears and improvise their experience of sound. Both are equally valid and invited by me as ways to experience the pieces.
So it's like a choose your own adventure, but for the audience.
That's what I think.
Yeah, that's great. Moon, when we think of sustainability and the environment or nature, how do these concepts influence your work?
So I'm a composer and I'm kind of a researcher. It's kind of strange to say I'm a researcher, but I build these circuits for my work. I wrote the design circuit and build the electric circuit that create the signals and using them for my creative work. So I have been doing for a few years, and one day I realized that I'm creating so much e-waste. You know, I'm just put together, and many of them doesn't work, and I put it in the box, and I have like a box of circuits that doesn't work, or it works but not desirable sound. So my wife hates me, but hates that I keep the not hates me, but hates the things that I'm keeping in the boxes. Our house is quite small, but I keep the stuff. So one day I was thinking like, oh, okay, I mean, I should throw away, but I don't want to throw away all those things. It's becoming really e-waste. So I decided to thinking like, okay, maybe I will recycle it. I mean, I'm basically the same material over and over again. So maybe it takes some time to desolder it and then put it together, but I don't have to pay extra money to buying it. Also, it can save some, it saves the environment. So that's how I started to recycling the material from my previous work and also discarded materials. So I have been building this new circuits based on those materials, and that becomes my recent project that utilizing those music interaction as a sound sources, and my student, I performed it at the conference like a few weeks ago. I think maybe I can show the pictures.
Yeah, I think we could maybe show some examples, right? So what do we see here?
Can we show the other one first, because I want to mention my student first. So this is my students at New York University. We are a laptop orchestra, and we basically play laptops, but not only laptops. We play some found object and amplified, or the interaction, the devices we create. And this is the performance a few weeks ago at the Transducer Festival in the Troy in New York. So you can see that they're using some stuff, not traditional instrument, but that's something that I built with the students, and they are creating the noise and putting in the water, and using different materials like that. So maybe
so found the recycled objects as potentials for sound.
Right. So maybe you can put the next picture. So this is my recent. I mean, the kind of all the discarded material, like you can see that like a Danish cookie box, and that's the I think that's the yeast jar, and this is a candy boxes, and also inside the materials were my previous work. I mean, previous circuits that didn't work, most of them. And that actually gave me lots of future project ideas, and I'm working on the new project that using the toys. Like I have 2 kids, and my wife always throw away the new toys. It seems like my wife is throwing everything because the house is small. One day I was thinking that toys can be actually quite useful when you're actually turning into the musical instrument. That way the kids can learn different things, different sounds. So that project I'm working on now, and it's continuing, recycling and reusing the materials.
Great, thank you. Eloisa, you programmed or are going to program, right? The Prima Trio, and we have a little excerpt that you'd like to share with us. Initially, we would have liked to have one of the members of the Prima Trio with us. Unfortunately, that wasn't possible. But Eloisa is here to talk to us a little bit about your artistic practice.
Yes, thanks, Jeff. So I'm here representing Ultima Festival, which is based in Oslo. Happens every year in September, and we are members of the Impact Network. And as you said before, Jeff, the Impact Network is concerned with global issues that confront presenters, and one of them is the climate or environmental crisis. And one of the ways of dealing with this crisis or this issue as presenters is to work towards a more sustainable, ecologically sustainable ecosystem in the new music world. And there are many actors involved in this process. No? So artists are one of them, and we wanted to hear what artists are doing in this respect. There have been some surveys that have come to our attention in the last times, both by the Nordic Music Days and by the Ulysses networks, where they asked young composers and artists, how concerned are you with the climate crisis and how does it impact your work? And an overwhelmingly number of answers have to deal with, like, I don't know, green tools or like, let's say, more sustainable programming in terms of like concrete measures one can take locally, but there is also the artistic preoccupation. So I think that one of the things that we as presenters can do is for young artists or artists that are interested in finding ways of dealing with this issue is to present models, to present artists that are working like that. So we had planned, I wasn't planning to sit here, I was planning to invite the Perma Trio to be here talking about their work. So they are a trio from Norway, very much inspired by permaculture, and they use principles of permaculture to commission work and to work together. So because they couldn't be here, we commissioned a small video where you can get to know a bit more about their work, and if there are questions afterwards, I will try to supplement. So you can play the video.
It's been like a growing passion to do gardening. We got a very old garden. I felt like the garden itself was teaching me something, and I was very careful about everything I did. So I discovered permaculture, and it was like it clicked, because that's what I have been observing in my own garden for years. How nature can grow itself and find solution on its own. You shouldn't interfere too much. And with permaculture, that kind of resonated with me. At some point I thought, if I don't do this in music, I'm gonna quit music. Permaculture is built on 12 principles, and they immediately give like an artistic, musical association.
Definitely. And I also think artistic and musical, but also human direction.
Yes.
So much of it can be applied on just being here together with other people.
Yeah.
And especially then, of course, working with art, music.
Jeg fikk for et par år siden en bestilling fra Perma Trio, og bestillingen som kom deretter, den var direkte relatert til det som var permakultur, noe som jeg på det tidspunktet ikke kjente til overhodet. Jeg har tatt utgangspunkt i to prinsipper fra permakulturen. To av de prinsippene snakket veldig til meg. Det ene handlet om ordet feedback blir nevnt, på måten man gir feedback tilbake til naturen. For det akkurat som at han snakker til deg, så gir han feedback. På et helt konkret nivå så har jeg vært veldig opptatt av fenomenet feedback, som man kjenner veldig godt til hvis man er musiker. Denne brukte lyden når man putter mikrofonen foran høyttaleren. En effekt som jeg bruker i nesten all musikken jeg lager. Og så er det det sjette prinsippet som også snakker om å lage closed loops, egentlig i plantinga, hvor man har gjensidige, positive, symbiotiske beplantninger, hvor plantene hjelper hverandre. Det er altså samme jeg tenkte også å lage sånne små closed loops i stykket mitt.
Pieces from composers, and we are also working on improvisation.
Yeah.
And the improvisation part is very close to permaculture principles, right?
Yeah.
Apply self-regulation.
Yeah.
And anyone who has done any improvisation knows this, and receive feedback.
Yeah. And use the feedback, yeah.
And use the feedback.
Yeah.
But you also have to take your space.
Definitely.
Like a plant.
Yeah.
For jeg tror det er veldig viktig å tillate at noe allmulighet kan skje. Sånn som akkurat som min støy av alle frekvenser samtidig, så har jeg også forsøkt å så en rekke og få dyrka fram masse spirer og se på en måte hvilken spire som er sterkest på grunn av den konteksten det er i. Så kaos er helt nødvendig for å få fram tydelig orden og tydelig tid, tydelige motiver, tydelig mening.
We are all explorers on our own instruments as well. It's very interesting dynamic to work with composers and finding a mutual standpoint or a mutual set-off for the project.
Yeah. I think it's very exciting to experience how very, very different the outcome is.
In the different pieces.
In the different pieces, yeah.
Yes.
They have permaculture and they have us, but it sounds completely... It's like different worlds, different parts of the garden.
Yeah. So we've been trying to say this, how explosive it is as well. It's not just blissful balance and beauty. It's soil and animal life, insects, bugs, and worms. And
dirt.
Yeah, that all come together and it's just exploding into life.
Thank you, Eloisa. Food for thought, I feel, because so here my understanding is that we've got the commissioned works by this ensemble that are based on or inspired by the 12 principles of permaculture. Is that correct? How many commissioned pieces are we talking about, and where does the project go after?
As far as I know, there has been it's quite a recent project, so there's been 4 commissions. So you've seen Jan Martin Smørdal talking about it. They have also commissioned the Swedish composer Jenny Hetne, Jonas Skorud from Norway as well, and Well, there are other composers coming up soon, so it's been mostly in the Nordic space. And so each composer has chosen different principles to work with, and that's kind of the inspiration.
That's great. Because when we talk about the concepts of feedback and closed loops that are mentioned like that, I think immediate musical sort of resonance is there. I don't know the 12 principles of permaculture. Are there others that show up in some of the other works?
Yes, I guess that I think Jonas Kurt, for example, he was interested in this idea of integrating rather than segregating, or things springing out of like self kind of generating systems. So he is working with that, how the group is very improvisation based, how the group itself can make the word be constructed. So he takes I think like excerpts from I think let me just check here, because he actually wrote me a little text, pieces from John Cage's In a Landscape, which are stretched up, cut up, fragmented, and then kind of improvised upon to create this disorder, let's say, where things are integrated. This is one example, and I think there are many.
And what partners are involved in this in terms of presentation-wise? Like obviously Ultima is a partner.
Not yet, actually.
Oh,
so,
interesting.
No, it was actually just an effort. It was an interesting opportunity. This conference to just for us to look at what is being done in Norway. So we will present this eventually. I'm not sure what compositions, like this piece has been presented already, but it's just a way of kind of starting a dialogue with the artists and seeing, okay, what has been done. So there is no other partners involved so far.
Okay, but an interesting way also of perhaps stimulating that kind of reflection with the audience, right? And Kate, I'd be curious to hear from a presenter's perspective how that manifests itself. Like with Great Northern, for example, you do have this preoccupation, right?
Yes. Hi, everyone. So I have two platforms that I work on. One is Liquid Music, a new music series, and very often presenting work that is inspired by the environment, of course, and nature. But I actually want to talk about my other platform, the Great Northern, which is a festival, winter festival in Minneapolis and St. Paul, Minnesota. And it's a really interesting platform for getting into climate issues because it started out as a festival that was concerned, or wanted to kind of celebrate winter culture and all that it is in our in the place that we live. And so it was a bit of a lighthearted attempt before my time to get people outdoors and being present in winter and engaging with the environment in fun ways. 4 years ago when I joined the organization, we really made an attempt to make arts a major part of the festival because winter time is a wonderful art making time, and it's a time that our orchestras are flush, our galleries are fullest, and a lot of great work is being rolled out at that time. So I thought, of course, art needs to be part of this festival, but also climate needs to be part of this festival because our winters are changing so quickly, and the type of winter culture that we've been used to is shifting beneath our feet, and we see the future. So the intersection of the outdoors, climate, and the arts working together makes for a really interesting space for artists to imagine new projects, both indoors and outdoors. And I know that people working in the climate space have really said, like, this is incredibly helpful from our perspective because we have a lot of climate conferences, a lot of talks, a lot of good information out there, but it's kind of siloed conversation. We're not getting different types of people together, and really, art's role in the climate crisis is kind of getting this information into our bodies, our feelings. We had Brian Eno as a keynote speaker a couple of years ago and virtual because he doesn't fly anymore. But a point that he makes that I keep quoting, but he talks about artists as feelings merchants, and how we need to get into our feelings to really start bringing about new ideas. And from the place of ideas, of course, comes actionable thought. And but until we internalize what's going on and reflect on it and feel it in our bones, it's hard to begin that next step toward action. So when I'm programming music, the Great Northern, I think about, you know, what are ways to bring about like emotional responses, very much, you know, sensorial experiences, sometimes projects connecting to, you know, data points in nature that, you know, lead into score making. A lot of different examples, but in some ways, you know, we don't have to be really on the nose, and we don't need a piece of music about the climate crisis necessarily, but we have climate talks that are happening during the festival, leaders from around the world sharing great action and great new ideas. There's a lot of intersection between different industries, and between these talks is opportunity for us to take in art that can move us and can help us kind of just like absorb some of the information that we've heard and get our brain processing, and, you know, again, getting ourselves into like feeling space during the festival. So I found it a really incredible creative playground, and happy to share about specific projects too. You know.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about some specific, because what I find interesting is if we make the bridge with what we were discussing earlier, this role of the artist as storyteller seems to be coming back, right? So as and in the case perhaps of your festival, have you got some specific examples of works that were telling that story or raising the flag in terms of our climate crisis?
Yeah, well, one was a bit more abstract, but I think it kind of got people into interesting headspace. So the Icelandic composer and sound artist Ben Frost had an idea for an opera that we commissioned the first part of. So it was inspired by J.A. Baker's book, The Peregrine, and the libretto was by British nature writer Robert Macfarlane. And so the basics of the story are that a man is tracking this pair of peregrine falcons across England, and it's a bit psychedelic, and you know, over the course of a season from fall to spring, ends up almost becoming one with his subjects, and it goes from someone who watches and observes to embodying and having the spirit of the bird. And so this piece was, was on electronics. We had a local choir that was engaged, and they were the voices. And we had Keely Forsyth, a British musician who was kind of like a voice of God in the production. And, you know, it was a 20-minute work, and we want to build the entire opera. So opportunity for us to talk about future incarnations. But anyway, it was a really, you know, it was a piece inspired by a work of literature. But we also do, you know, sound baths. So I'm working with Angelica Negron to create this piece called Floresta, which is basically a sound bath experience, but it uses biodata and to create the score that becomes the work, and so that is, you know, something that people can. Well, we haven't chosen the venue yet, but we'll do something that is. You know what sound baths are, so yeah, those are a couple. We've you know found we have the quietest room in the world in Minneapolis. There's this anechoic chamber that we isn't usually open to the general public, and we had it open during the festival, so opportunity for people to experience quiet in a way that they've never experienced in their lifetime and see how that feels. and yeah, so just kind of all over.
Well,
Mm.
Eloisa, with your presenter's hat on, do you, because you've had your first season at Ultima, in terms of your future programming, how are these issues? How are you considering these issues? Which way are you taking to connect your audience also with issues surrounding eco-responsibility and the environment?
Oh, there are many ways of doing this. So if you look at the project for the festival, there are so many artists that are working very explicitly with environmental issues. We have, for example, this year our opening concert to be Chris Watson and Jana Vinderen, who has been recording whales in an area of Norway that is affected or will be affected soon by deep sea mining. So they were dealing with something very explicit. There are many productions of that kind. What I found interesting about the specific example that we showed is the fact that it's not an explicit discussion on environment. It's more adopting discourses that exist or that inspire to different ways of doing, and hence to different attitudes of being. So it's a kind of this way of looking at how artists get inspired to compose or make differently. How can we show the audiences? Use this motivation by the artists to inspire audiences to do the same. So it's a more indirect way of working. It's also quite interesting. So this is like, yeah, does this count as an answer?
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious to know whether are there other examples of works, or also you have a hat now as a presenter, newly at the FIMAV in Victoriaville. How are you approaching these issues in your programming and also in your practice?
As a presenter, not explicitly. This is a very specific part of my work, and I don't consider it to be activist work, but particularly in this project, the publication is conceived as a field guide. Those of you that have flipped through it can see that each musician is paired with a tree, and it has field guide type information, and that's a gesture toward kinds of attention and kinds of learning that the piece invites, but doesn't demand.
That's great. I think we have, this panel could have included, just here in Montreal, probably 15 other artists, and I'm sure that in your respective centers as well, that exist. I think it displays how these issues are really part of our collection, beginning to be part of our collective consciousness. And I'd be curious to turn towards the room, because I'm not going to force any of you to speak, but I know very well that we have several other artists that are tackling these issues in their practices. Anyone else who'd like to share some of their practice or some of their recent works? Louise Campbell.
Just last spring, I had a huge project that again combined cultural mediation with an actual event, and it's called Sources, Music and Art Inspired by the St. Lawrence River. And so I went into a lot of schools, adult education centers. There was actually quite a lot of people who also use different mobility devices, and it was all about sound walking and just getting people to center themselves in their own experience of whatever their natural environment was, whether it was, in the playground of an inner city school, or in a suburb, or I actually wasn't able to go to the St. Lawrence River with any of the places that I was at, but we located it in Parc Frédéric Bac, which is a park that is built on the old landfill of Montreal. And so I think part of my concern with this work was it was something that I wanted to make, and again, it was a collection of pieces that I started to look like an album to me with a theme. But part of my concern was I didn't want it to become propaganda, I wanted it to be an invitation for people to think about their own experience and their own relationship with nature. So when it got to the park, here were a whole bunch of kids who were living in inner city kind of contexts where their playground didn't have a single piece of grass, And many of the kids might have lived in an apartment that didn't have a balcony or a courtyard. And so I realized very quickly that it was a really big thing to ask these kids to sit on the grass and sit there and not listen, not talk with their neighbor, but actually kind of look really deeply, closely at a bug, and to listen to the sound of the wind in the leaves. And so I kind of felt like it was important to me to just set up the experience in order for people to make their own understanding of what their relationship was with nature. So I like the way that you put it, Scott, of your context creator. That for that project, it was really, really important for me. It was definitely a concern of mine, though, not wanting to tell people what to think through art. And I'd be curious if anybody on the panel has any response to that.
And in support of that, you know, I think creating a space for questions to be asked or reflection to happen by participants and it is ideal. I'm working on mounting a piece on a hillside that will hopefully happen this next winter, and hopefully it will be a snowy hillside. But there's a piece called The Radar by Ryoji Ikeda that has only been done once before on a beach in Brazil, actually. But it will be specific for this place in the universe, and it will be a projection on the hillside of the universe mirrored on the ground from that exact point. And it will be a free event where anyone can come and walk through it and be a participant on the art piece. It will be a sound installation as well with radar mapping. And it really isn't explicit in terms of, you know, what you're supposed to feel or like answers that you should definitely go away with, but it is a opportunity to, you know, I mean, have fun with art first of all, but also like engage with place and you know, think about how your being in the place you are informs how you see the world, and you know, all sorts of questions. You can pose all sorts of questions yourself with it, and the artist is not being explicit necessarily, but creating something specifically for our hillside, you know, and our place in the universe. And it is an experience where you feel like the vastness of things, certainly. So anyway,
But it's interesting the similarities in three of these, which allow us opportunities to explore our natural environment and then reflect on our relationship with it as well. And I think that's we talk about what we can change in terms of our ways of presenting, in terms of changing our models. But I think creating spaces to reflect on, hey, so what can we present? What can we include in our programming for our audience that will stimulate these reflections, but in perhaps other ways that are, you know, ways of playfully exploring environments that incite that kind of reflection. Sandy, yes.
Hi. A lot of my work over the last 10 years has been questioning the presentation mode that you were just mentioning. I've started several projects that were, I don't want to say in nature, but outside. As there's no space that is devoid of human activity, of course. And one major project last year was in the festival Klanglandschaft near Berlin, where there's an involuntary nature reserve. Involuntary because you cannot grow anything or build anything because the ground is so toxic from chemical waste that no one is allowed to do anything there. But there are villages there that, you know, it was GDR time and they didn't care about toxic waste at all. We just put it where people lived. And so this is a very strange area, an area of stunted growth and so on. And the only thing that there's a festival there that wants to somehow react to this situation. And they commissioned me with a project, and what we did in the end was to do concerts with the animals that live there. There are also some very strange birds, sometimes strange insects. That meant that the musicians who were invited, but who were also children, who were all kinds of musicians, not only professional musicians, at specific times of day when I had found out through listening that certain types of animals would be most active. Birds are most active just before sunrise, and so it was a concert at 3 o'clock in the morning, lasting until 4 o'clock in the morning when the sun rises in the summer, which meant that apart from the people who took part, who were also amateurs, only the local population came. No one would get up on a train in Berlin at 2 o'clock in the morning and drive out to a countryside there. And that was really great. It was kind of something where everybody then said, okay, let's have breakfast at our homes afterwards. And then we had breakfast, and then we went to the next concert, which was at noon with insects. That had in a very specific area, had very loud insect noises, and we had all kinds of wind instruments, from kazoo to horn to alphorns, who participated in that. So these kind of projects that shape a space in a different way, or space our relationship to a space in a different way, are very important to me. And I've begun to take that back into the concert hall now. So there are projects like a piece for as many percussionists as you want, some of them amateurs, some of them professionals, that invest the space. And this has led me to an exploration of the thing that defines music most, namely synchronicity. Synchronicity is the mainstay of music making, and it's exactly what is not happening when we are looking outside of us. When we're looking in the processes have their own times, their own time scales. They coincide sometimes, maybe by chance, but not all of them coincide at the same time. And so the concept of elastic time, of different temporalities, has become very central to my work. And so the most recent piece was with Quasar, where I questioned the relationship of musicians through communicating through a mycelial network with each other. So there is a lot of, creativity is what nature does, or what the world does, basically. And I think music so far has explored and kind of invested itself so little into the many possibilities for creativity that exist. So I'm very curious about that.
Thank you, Sandy.
Yeah, I was also just going to add that it is, I think sometimes it's nice just to have music, of course, as like standalone, and you do not need to offer answers. Specific questions don't need to be answered. But doing this festival now with climate talks as part of it has made me think about like how rich it can be to invest more in conversations. Also contextualizing work is when you're doing this much research that goes into a piece that is open-ended and can just be experienced that way and is fine on its own. It is also nice to be able to have the opportunity, if people want, to go deeper and learn more, and have learning experiences too. So just encourage that.
Yeah, so the role I've only got the French word, médiation culturelle in my head, so cultural mediation perhaps is a translation of that. So, but how to create a context for listening, perhaps for the others. And have you explored different strategies in terms of that? I'm curious.
I mean, so we have climate talks that kind of are all over the map, from artists, scientists, people in finance, people in all sorts of different industries, talking about like strategies for solving our climate crisis. So they aren't all connected to the art work, but there's inevitably conversations that intersect. And we've had the Audubon Society talking about bird migration changes, and pieces of music that get into that as well. But we weren't A lot of times, like, similar issues or inspirations will bubble up because they're in the general consciousness. And so if you're talking to someone who has no, connection to the artwork, they're inspired by the same culture, and a lot of, times you'll get into some of the same stuff anyway. So I don't always plan them like they have to be so explicit, but artist conversations are part of our festival too, and so then you can get into the specifics of the work of art.
No, I just wanted to comment on what Sandeep was saying about the concerts in the park, in Berlin, and how the animals were interacting. And I'm just sitting here like thinking how different this type of procedure is than the conversation we had in the first say part of the conference. Because when we are going to nature, there are many projects that are kind of, you go to the nature to kind of be with the nature and let it be part of the work, so that we somehow develop a different type of relationship with this nature. But it's also kind of a very appropriationist way of thinking about the relationship with nature, because we kind of stage them into our works. And I am just wondering how, perhaps this was more a question back to you, how you relate that, because you were talking before about this kind of how to make the bridge between two worlds and not the separation. So I wonder how you see it in this specific example.
Charlotte, could we pass the mic to Sandy?
In the example, there was no audience. Everybody was a participant, so it's not staged.
Just one second, Sandeep, just make sure we get you on microphone.
Sorry, okay, I'll give it. In this particular instance, there was no staging. Everybody was a participant in some way, and everybody could participate. It was a multi-tiered way of engaging with whatever we would call the score or the instructions or whatever they were. And it ranges from expert musicians to children who don't read anything and can still participate. And that made it less something that is shown for artistic benefit, for cultural benefit, and more something where you foreground an experience. Because what many people then said was, I like to go out in the summer early in the morning and hear, because they were all locals, there were people who lived there. So I like to go out in the morning, and now I will hear it differently. I'm not only looking at the landscape, I'm going to listen to the things. And so that's a different way of engaging with the things that are around you. But I understand, of course, the concern. It can easily become that. But then a park already is not something that is devoid of human intervention. And this landscape that I was talking about, this toxic landscape, was not as it is because humans already destroyed it. So it's another attempt of maybe something of healing or something in that context, not in every other context, but in that one. But
I believe we have one last question. Or comment, perhaps.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to answer the question you asked a while ago, but my name is Cléo Palacio-Quintin. I'm a composer, flutist, and artist. And actually, I think as artists, we can also bring disconnection with nature, which is fantastic. I was a very happy audience of the art orientation project of Scott. That was amazing. But what I try to do in my work is to bring the consciousness of nature into the concert room, concert hall. And I think that's also a way of having the audience connecting with environment and nature, even in the city. And so, I think as artists we experience and we try to share our sensitivity through our work and involve feelings of people. And I think there's many artists that, like what I do, is to try to encapsulate like this fascination for nature into my work and bring it back to the audience. And it's not necessarily very obvious. It can be quite abstract, but somehow I think that my intention is to get people to feel something, and if it relates to nature, in my case I use video works, so there's some images that relate to nature, and then it established like a kind of different connection, or just inspire a connection to the audience. And then I hope that next time they go into nature, they look at it differently, or they listen to it differently.
Thank you, Cleo. Oh, one last one. Terry.
Hi there. I'm Terry Hron. A lot of my work deals with our connection and relationship to everything around us and its peril, I guess. I just wanted to share something that I learned recently, which is that the human brain and language, parts of our brain grew and developed in order to be able to speak, but recent research has shown that that part of the brain existed before language existed, and that part of the brain also coincides with our ability to vocalize in certain ways. And so the researchers started to think, well, why did we have this capacity if we weren't going to be saying anything? And the most recent theories about that are that it was for collective grooming, because in small groups, grooming happens on a physical level, that we actually touch each other, or animals touch each other physically, but that this capacity was there to be able to do this on a large group scale. And why I felt moved to share this with you at this moment is that music predates language, and sound making is there for connection and healing. And I think that these are really fundamental things in music making.
Thank you, Terry. Lawrence, would you like to add one last thing? And then after that, I think we'll break to eat.
Just to remember the late great R. Murray Schafer, who of course throughout his career, what he believed two things, more than that, but two important things. One was we had to get out of the concert hall to experience certain things, and we needed to do it in places and at times that took us out of our daily lives. And of course, Murray knew that music used to get us up at dawn, Princess of the Stars, Music for Wilderness Slave, all these incredibly site-specific works. And I'm not arguing that we can all do this, but Murray never gave up the idea that we had to be there to experience certain phenomena in nature. The tragedy is that Murray hated capturing things on video. We have so little memory of except for the people who were there during some of those pieces. Anyway, he's an interesting example of what can be done.
Yeah, thank you for that thought about Murray Schafer. Obviously, this discussion of site-specific works does evoke his work. I'd like to thank you all for listening today and for participating in the discussion. Thank you to our panelists of both sessions. Special thanks also to our tech team, and also to Charlotte Collin, who has organized many of the events this week. And we request that all of you who've been here, we'd like to get a group photo, since we've got this amazing backdrop of the city of Montreal behind us. So if we could all perhaps come forward and...
We'll do it here.
Perfect.
Here.
Thank you very much.